So welcome everyone to Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario Financial Abuse Webinar Series. So this is the first in a number of sessions that we'll be hosting throughout the month and the next month around financial issues. So today we're pleased to present a webinar on money tips for difficult times. We are hosting that in partnership with the Ontario Securities Commission, and we're pleased to partner with them. We've done previous webinars in March together, and today should be another outstanding presentation. I just want to provide some housekeeping issues before we get started. All attendees will be muted during the webinar. We are recording the webinar, and this will be posted on our website after the session, at least the next day, to give us time to upload it. We have the generosity of the sign language interpreter today, who will be interpreting the session. If you have questions that you would like to ask the presenters, please put that in the chat box. You can adjust the size of the video for the interpreter by just dragging the black line beside the interpreter to make the image a little larger for you on your own screen. So you do that individually. We aren't doing that on our screen, but you can do that to yourself. The speakers will be visible. Hopefully we can work out that logistic in time. Again, questions, if you have questions as the presentation goes on, I encourage you to put the actual question in the question answer box. And if you have any technical issues that arise, please put those in the chat box. So we will be able to respond to those. My colleague, Laura Proctor, will be answering those as we go through. There will be a short evaluation after the session. We're asking you to complete it will come up as a pop-up. There's only about 10 questions or so. We'd appreciate your feedback about the session, as well as ideas or suggestions for future webinars. And all the contact information for speakers will be provided at the end of the presentation. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce the colleagues from the Ontario Securities Commission. Raj will do a short introduction, welcoming everybody, and then we'll start our formal presentation. So Raj, would you like to bring greetings?
Yeah, thank you, Rianne. I just turned on my video. I want to make sure the interpreter's video is not turned off by me turning it on. Hope that's okay. If something goes crazy, I'll just turn off my video. Just let me know. Okay. So thank you, Rianne. We're very happy to be here. As Rianne said, my name is Raj. I'm Raj Balasubramanian. I'm the Manager of Investor Engagement and Outreach at the Ontario Securities Commission. And we are from the Investor Office. So with me is my colleague, Christine Allen, who's from the Investor Office, and also Michael Hutchinson, who's from our enforcement branch. So what we're here to talk about today is, how the COVID-19 situation has impacted people's finances. There's a lot of fraud going around because of COVID-19. And the vulnerable groups in the population are being targeted unevenly with this sort of fraud. And what we're hoping out of this session is we share some tips that you can use to better protect yourself and also protect the people that you love. We do these webinars in person as part of our OSC in the Community program, and we go across the province. And because of COVID-19, we're doing it remotely and virtually, but the message is still the same, that people are still out there who are targeting vulnerable groups for their money, and we need to make sure people have the resources to better protect themselves. So just know that at the end of the section, there is a Q&A period. Please ask your questions. Please reach out to us. Our work can only be successful if you provide us feedback on how we're doing and suggestions. And also, no question is a bad question. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want. And if we're not able to get to it during the session, our contact information will be provided, so you can reach out to us after. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to turn it back to Rianne. And Rianne, maybe you want to put up the slides for Chris and Mike. But thank you for joining us, and we're very happy to be a part of this event today.
Thank you, Raj, for your opening remarks. I'm just going to ask the other speakers if you aren't speaking, just to put yourself on mute, because there was a background noise for that. So just before we get going, I just want to give a background information about our organization, Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. We are mandated to implement Ontario's strategy to combat elder abuse and have been doing so since about 2003. We do get funded through the Ontario Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility. And we work in close partnership with them to do our programming and outreach to the community, both in training, and education and community collaboration. So really our bottom line is making sure that we stop abuse and restore respect, and engaging people that we all have a role to play in preventing that. So our priorities, as I briefly mentioned, is that we play a role in coordinating services in response to elder abuse, working with our community networks, which are located across the province, and provincial and national organizations. We do training and education to frontline providers that are providing services and supports to older adults. And we do education, public awareness sessions such as today, to increase the knowledge and awareness around particular issues related to elder abuse and the safety and security of older adults. So many people may not be familiar, but November is actually Financial Literacy Month. And we would encourage you to check out some of the resources and tools, not only on our website, but also with the consumer services, the Government of Canada. They have many of the associations, or sorry, the government services have a lot of financial tips and tools. Our social media accounts are promoting those tools, as well as ourselves. So I would encourage you for the month to look at that. And that's why we're doing this webinar and during the month of November, because we feel it's really important to get that information out to our community members. So today just to give you an overview, as Raj mentioned, we're talking about the vulnerability of older adults to financial abuse. And we know through COVID, there has been an increase of frauds. So we want to provide you some tips around how you can prepare and protect yourself and your money, looking at how we can do emergency planning for your finances, reviewing your financial situation, creating that financial plan, how you can work with your financial advisor if you have one, and if you don't, how you can connect to have one, and then look at what resources we have if you needing further supports or having some complicated issues that you want further information from in our community, whether that's local or provincial. So I'm just going to begin the presentation by just giving a short overview of financial abuse, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues at the Ontario Securities Commission. So when we think about financial abuse, we're looking at any improper conduct of people taking an older adult's monetary funds for personal gain at the loss of the older adult. So a lot of the times we say it's with or without informed consent, because sometimes the person is not asking for permission, there's theft or forgery or stealing. The informed could be in relation to the powers of attorney, where you've given written documentation trusting that someone is going to look after your finances, but unfortunately they are taking those financial property for their own means and not for the older adults. So we do address both of those components. We know that 2/3 of financial abuse is committed by family members or someone in that position of trust. So this is a list of individuals that could be in that position that take advantage of that, causing financial harm or financial loss to the older adult in their lifetime, or maybe when the power of attorney does become enacted, that the person does experience financial loss. One of the references you may have heard often is that financial abuse is referred to as the crime of the 21st century, which is quite sad, because we see so many older adults who've worked hard all their lives who are being taken advantage of financially. And at their age of how do they regain all the personal income that they've earned over the years. 75% of the consumer wealth is held by people over the age of 50. And we see, statistics indicate that with decline in mental capacity, that older adults are vulnerable to abuse of finances because they rely on someone to manage their banking, they're paying their bills. And sometimes that seemed a little bit more difficult to prosecute in some of those cases because they may not be able to get the story from an older adult, but that doesn't mean the fact that it still can't go through the court system, because many cases still do. It just makes it maybe a little bit more complicated to prosecute. But those cases, I know for a fact that some of those cases still get through the court system. And also there's some stigma around that being a victim or loss of one's freedom, maybe seen as unfit to manage their own property, maybe the reasons why people don't report. So they're afraid. They think that people may not, see them as competent or able anymore if they are to report those situations, which we want to get away from that stigma, because we wanted to secure people's finances so they can live, a safe and have the financial means to live within the means that they have. So we also want to look at today the financial losses of investments and frauds and all those other particular issues that happen to older adults, which our OSC partners are going to go into detail about. I also want to highlight the fact that during COVID, we have seen an increase of vulnerabilities of older adults being isolated, not being able maybe to get to the bank, relying on other people to manage their funds maybe during this time. So they're at an increased risk for abuse and that vulnerability of someone in that position of trust that does take advantage of them, unfortunately. And we've seen more media attention towards the issue of elder abuse than we have in the past because of COVID. And that's not to say that this is a new issue. We know it has been existing for many, many years. And the fact is that now it's coming to light, that people are coming out, they're talking about it. The pandemic has brought forth the heartache and the physical pain, the neglect that someone in a position of trust has caused to those individuals. So I really think it's important for us to say that this is not new. We've been dealing with it for many, many years, but it's good that it is coming out and that people are seeking help. It's just unfortunate that sometimes these traumatic events in our society sometimes bring forth these issues more to our community's attention, but it's good that people are more aware. And these sessions that we're doing today will bring you more awareness to recognize some of those signs that might happen to an older adult, that your neighbor, your friend, family member, so then you can help them if you suspect that there's financial abuse happening. So just going quickly over some of the risk factors. Now I've talked about loneliness and isolation. That's really, related to COVID, but there are a lot of people prior to COVID, they do live in isolated areas, and their family situation may not be as healthy as others. Living with a relative puts people at risk, where someone is taking advantage of the living situation, where the older adult ends up paying for a majority of the costs associated with the home, and the person living with them is not contributing. I'm not going to list everything, but we do see things around unemployment. There's trust in that younger generation to desire to help out, but that sometimes they're more trusting. But then they get taken advantage of by saying, something's going to cost 4 times as much or 10 times as much. They're just taking advantage of that situation. And we also know sometimes it can be a little bit more complicated to deal with financial tasks that could happen as time. And I know that financial accountability, managing finances is a little bit more complicated with our technical world these days. Everything is being pushed online. Just managing that can be complicated. So it may just take someone a little bit longer to do their banking, but that doesn't mean that they still aren't able. But if they have to rely on someone to help them, that could put them in that position where if someone's not being trusted and they're taking their Visa card or they've got their Visa number, then they could do online banking. There's so many loopholes that people could take advantage of individuals from that. So, being financially sophisticated and well educated might give the older adult a sense of overconfidence, so that, I've been a bank manager forever, I know what I'm doing. But in fact, maybe there's some things that they may not be aware of now with changes in the technology and online learning and online access to tools and resources that they may not have been aware of. And things change on a regular basis, as we know. Just trying to keep up with what's happening in society, particularly with COVID. Everything has shifted. Even working with lawyers has changed. So just being informed is really, really important. And lastly, before we get into it, I think the three issues that we often see as elements of financial crime are greed, that false sense of entitlement, and that opportunity. So people feeling that, they really think it's their money. They have that sense that it's going to be theirs one day. I deserve it because I'm the one providing the care. So I should be able to, help myself to extra funds. They may have access in terms of if they are the power of attorney, they have access to those bank funds and bank accounts and access to the financial investments that they can act on behalf of that older person or their loved one. And they're using that, again, not for the purpose of the older adult, for their well-being, but for themselves. So we see these elements often intertwined with financial abuse. And just lastly, just want to say that it is a criminal offense. Elder abuse itself is not a criminal offense, but these issues around finances that you see listed here, around theft of holding a power of attorney, are criminal offenses that can be individuals can be charged with. And I know we see those in the newspaper that people have been charged with many of these situations, particularly even like the fraud issue, which I know my friends will talk about today. So I'm going to turn over to my colleagues at the Ontario Securities Commission, talking about our Financial Literacy Month and giving you the information that they have. So as Raj indicated, our two speakers this afternoon are Chris Allam, and Chris is a senior advisor at the Investment Office, and she's worked with many community groups and organizations to deliver investment education and fraud workshops. And we also have that's Raj, as he's already left us, but he may return, as I said. So Raj is the manager of the Investment Office, and Michael Hutchinson, who's a senior investigator in enforcement. He has a background as a regional police officer from Peel, and once he retired from that, got into some specialized investigations unit, and he had joined the Ontario Securities Commission in 2012. So I'm pleased to now turn the presentation over to both of them for their presentation this afternoon.
Great, thank you very much, Rianne. Well, hello everyone. My name is Chris, as Rianne mentioned, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the frauds that are happening and what are some of the things you can do during, this particular time to help you make some good financial decisions and help with any financial challenges. So one of the things I always like to start off with is really, who is the OSC and why are we here talking to you? Raj shared a little bit, but really we are a government agency. We're responsible for regulating capital markets in Ontario. A key part of our mandate is to provide protection to investors. And one of the best ways to provide protection is to ensure that people have good information. So I work within the investor office of the OSC. And really within the investor office, we educate people, we have a policy function, we do research, certainly we do investor engagement and outreach. This is investor engagement and outreach where, normally we travel the province, but I'm still sharing information with you virtually, but we also engage with you because you have the opportunity to also ask us questions. And this is nice because it's a two-way street. You ask questions so we can hear what your concerns are. And if there are things that we should be doing on our end, whether it's with respect to a policy issue or developing a new resource, at least we know that there are things that we can do to help you. I mentioned that we do research. So our next slide, we'll talk about a little bit of what we're doing in research. COVID-19. We just completed some research during this particular period because we wanted to see, what are investors experiencing right now? And 47% of Canadians have seen an increase in their stress levels regarding to their investments. So that's almost 50% of Canadians who are investors who have seen an increase in stress levels. You know what's interesting? Only 26% not 26, but 26% of investors had not reached out or had no communications with their advisor. You know, I think if you're working with someone and they're helping you manage your finances and you have increased stress level, there's a perfect time to have a dialogue, have a communication with them. And if you're communicating with them, you know, what are you talking about? Certainly you want to discuss the market, economic issues, and how that is affecting your financial situation. The other thing we also know, and next slide, please, is that there's a lot of frauds going on. And that is also increased people's stress level. So with that said, I'm going to invite Mike, my colleague, to talk a little bit about fraud.
Well, thanks very much, Chris. And it's good to be with everybody here today. As Rianne mentioned, I was a police officer before I became an investigator at the OSC. So I've seen firsthand the devastation that can happen when people are victimized with respect to their finances in particular. You know, there's lots of numbers we can throw out here. 1 in 25 Canadians say they've been a victim of investment fraud, which represents about 1.5 million Canadians. About 1 in 5 Canadians say they've been approached about a potential fraudulent scheme. And these are investment frauds, not just any other type of fraud. These are specifically investment frauds. And only about 1 in 3 Canadians who have been approached with an investment fraud have actually reported it. And we talked about some of the reasons why that is. And often it's just embarrassment. And we know fraud is a vastly underreported crime. Next slide, please. So we just want to talk today in particular about some of the frauds that we're seeing that are specific to the COVID-19 pandemic. But of course, the information here applies pretty much at any time. The scams are the same. They just sort of change the messaging a little bit to fit whatever narrative is they want to fit. So what we're seeing at the OSC, you know, is work from home scams, for instance. People are being offered the opportunity to earn some extra income. Maybe they've had, you know, some sort of an interruption in their usual income streams. So they're offering, these fraudsters are offering opportunities to work from home. You're perhaps presented with an opportunity to work as a securities or a derivatives trader, you know, without any license or experience. Often in these scams, you'll be asked to send some sort of money up front for like an information package or some sort of a registration, or to prepay some sort of a tax obligation. Of course, as soon as you part with your money, you've become a victim of fraud, and you'll never hear from the fraudsters again, because there really isn't any work from home job. Often people are receiving warnings about their finances. They're being contacted and asked for sensitive and personal information. We always recommend never give out your personal information over the phone or online unless you are absolutely confident with the legitimacy of the person you're dealing with. People are receiving fake government messages about their COVID benefit or some other government benefit related to this pandemic. You know, they'll often ask you to click on a link or open up an attachment to confirm information or to provide information. You know, these unsolicited approaches are often huge red flags, and we recommend you not open them up and not respond to them. Simply delete them. If you want information, go directly to the source yourself. Like, go to the government agency or go to whatever agency it is that you need to communicate with. Look up their website, look up their phone number, reach out to them directly, and that way you can be sure that you're speaking with a legitimate representative of whatever agency it is you wish to speak with. Advanced fee loans. You know, people with difficulties during this time with their income flows are sometimes being offered loans. They'll say, okay, we'll loan you $10,000, but you know, we need you to send us a fee of $1,000 first to cover the fees before we advance the loan. Of course, as soon as you part with $1,000 or whatever amount it is, you become a victim of fraud. Next slide, please. So there's some really good information. We'll talk about it a little further in the presentation. A website that's sponsored by the Ontario Securities Commission Investor Office, and it's Get Smarter About Money. It's a great website. There's lots of great resources. And on this slide here, there's some specific information with respect to pump and dump scams, fake government messages, and just general warnings about your finances. And in addition to these messages, there's a lot of really great information on the website, just about finances in general and sort of the red flags of fraud, what to look out for, what to avoid. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the scams that we see, and I'll tell you a little bit about how they work and what to watch out for. We've seen fraudsters during this pandemic talk or getting involved in what we call pump and dumps. And what they'll do is they reach out to potential investors unsolicited. They use the global events. In this case, it's the COVID pandemic, and they're trying to pump up a certain stock. And generally, they're lightly traded stocks, lightly traded companies. The fraudsters will first collect or buy large blocks of shares in these lightly traded companies. They then start issuing releases like, hey, this company, we have some sort of a miracle cure for COVID. We have a new therapeutic coming. We have a vaccine coming. And they start to slowly over time build up the legitimacy of the company and using false information. And it starts to drive the share value up. And it's all based on lies, essentially. And as the share value starts to increase, they start to sell their shares into the secondary market to retail investors. And of course, these things always end up reaching a tipping point where the share value is sort of maxed out. By then, the fraudsters have sold most of their shares, which they bought for next to nothing. They've sold their shares back into the market. They've got all the money. All the retail investors are left holding worthless shares and have become victims of a classic pump and dump scheme. So that's something to watch out for. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the red flags further on. Next slide, please. Affinity frauds are particularly egregious. The fraudsters will target particular groups, whether it's a cultural group, a religious group, a certain occupation. I had a case involving a hockey team where one of the players on the team was running a fraud. It was a fraudulent investment scheme. They generally will sort of join a group or an organization or belong to a particular cultural or religious organization. And over time, they ingratiate themselves in the group. They get to know people, they build trust, they build relationships, and then they start to slowly lure people into their investment scheme. So it's just something to watch out for. It's one of those things where if everybody else is jumping off a bridge, are you going to jump off as well? Like, just do your due diligence, make sure that the investment that's being pitched is legitimate, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to ensure that individuals and entities are properly registered. Ponzi schemes. In Ponzi schemes, there really is no underlying business or investment or entity to invest in. It's essentially just a smoke and mirrors. So the fraudsters will tell investors, like, listen, we've got a great opportunity. We've got whatever it is, whatever type of industry or business. They begin to sell shares to investors, and they promise a certain rate of return. And the early investors are receiving the interest on their investment. And the interest is being paid by the later investors. So as it begins to grow, the early investors are receiving all their interest. They're telling their friends and neighbors, and they're saying, hey, this is great. I'm getting a good return on my investment. And that lures more people to invest their money. Of course, like I say, the later money coming in pays interest on the earlier investors. And it's a classic, it's called a Ponzi scheme. It was after a guy named Ponzi back in the early 20th century. And it's a classic scheme. It's just nothing but straight fraud. Eventually they all implode. The biggest example was Bernie Madoff in the United States, who pulled off what I believe was somewhere in the area of a $60 billion Ponzi scheme. And he's now in prison for the rest of his life. Let's have the next slide, please. I guess an example of a 21st century Ponzi scheme was the Quadriga case that the OSC investigated, and as well as other agencies. 76,000 investors lost about $169 million, and about 40% of those people were Ontarians. It was just a Ponzi scheme using technology, essentially. It was a crypto asset trading platform. There's a really great report you can find on the OSC website. It was issued by the OSC. It was an overview of our investigation and how the scam was run. It's just something interesting if you wish to read it. Next slide, please. Double dip or repeat scams. We're seeing a lot of these. Con artists, the fraudsters will create, they reuse, and they sell lists of victims, people who have bought into investment scams. And they often will approach fraud victims after the fact. I've had cases where, people have been victimized in an investment scheme. They've lost their money. A period of time later, they're reapproached by somebody saying, hey, we understand you were an investment in ABC company. We represent a group of investors who have all been defrauded in the same scheme. We've consulted with a law firm. We think we've got a really good class action lawsuit. And we're asking everybody to contribute money to help fund the lawsuit. So we need $10,000 from you, or we need $5,000 from you, or something like that. And they just essentially are coming back to the well, and they're re-victimizing people. And 3 out of 10 fraud victims claim that they've been defrauded more than once. And so it's just something to be aware of. Well, some of the warning signs of fraud, high pressure sales tactics. If you get a phone call or an email or text from somebody you don't know, we're Canadian, we want to be polite. But you get an unsolicited phone call or email, just hang up. Don't hesitate to hang up. And you're not being rude. You're simply protecting yourself. If people just don't call out of the blue and offer some amazing investment opportunity with high returns and little risk. It just doesn't happen in the real world, the legitimate world. So, some of the warning signs: high pressure sales tactics, phone calls or emails or texts from people you don't know, free incentives like come and have a dinner on us or a lunch on us, promises of high or guaranteed returns with little to no risk. Very little is guaranteed in life, and very little in the investment area comes without risk. Or they'll encourage you to recruit your friends, your family, your neighbor, your coworkers. And they're unregistered businesses or individuals. And we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about checking registration. They'll suggest falsifying financial information. One of the things we often see is a form called the Accredited Investor Form. And it's a form that if to be eligible to buy or to sell certain investment products, you have to be an accredited investor, which means that you have an income level of a certain amount and a net worth of a certain amount. And it's a form that the investor fills out and signs. And often the fraudsters will ask investors to fudge the numbers a little bit so that they can make this work. Or sometimes they'll pitch the scheme as a tax avoidance strategy. We recommend you contact the Canada Revenue Agency or your accountant or your investment advisor and find out if a particular investment opportunity is in fact a tax avoidance strategy. They're not all illegal, but it's just another red flag to watch out for. Sometimes they'll pitch it that they're acting on inside information. Well, insider trading is illegal, so it's another red flag. So protect your money. Be skeptical. Question unsolicited investment opportunities over the phone, online, or from acquaintances. Get a second opinion before you invest. Talk to somebody who's qualified, a registered qualified advisor, your lawyer, perhaps your accountant. Take the time you need. Do your due diligence, do your homework. Be suspicious of time-limited offers and high-pressure tactics. If it's a legitimate investor, you shouldn't have to invest on the spot or make a really quick decision. Should always be given the time to do your due diligence. And before you make any investment, understand it. Understand the risks, understand the fees. Contact us. Well, we've got the OSC contact information. Our main number is 1-877-785-1555. Next slide, please. Well, we talked about doing a background check. Always check the registration of any person or business who they're trying to sell you an investment or give you investment advice. Registration guarantees that the person you're dealing with meets certain minimum standards in terms of their education, their qualifications, their integrity. To become registered with the OSC or with any securities regulator, there's a very rigorous background check that happens, and so you can you're provided certain protections as well if you're dealing with somebody who's properly registered, if they happen to do something that's not according to the rules. So registration helps protect you from unqualified individuals. So there's a website we have at the OSC manages. It's called checkbeforeyouinvest.ca. That's checkbeforeyouinvest.ca. Or again, call us at 1-877-785-1555. So if you suspect a scam, please let us know. If we can do something, we will. Even if we can't, having the information about all the scams that are going on helps us to tailor our responses. And so we'd like to know everything that's going on out there. So we encourage people to call us if you suspect a scam, whether you've been victimized or just been approached. You can always call us. Again, I'll keep repeating it. It's 1-877-785-1555. Or contact our inquiries and contact center. The email address is here. That'll be posted online after the presentation. You can contact your local police as well, or the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center at 1-888-495-8501. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. So now you've heard from Mike all about the different types of frauds that are happening out there and what some of those warning signs are so that you can better protect yourself from being a victim of a fraud. We're going to talk a little bit now about what are some of the things you can do to manage your finances, particularly in difficult times. And one of the things we know is people are looking for information on those government support programs. So on our website, we have a whole section called COVID-19 and Your Money, and we talk about the different support programs that are available. Next slide, please. So what am I going to cover? What are some of the things you can do? You can assess your financial situation. We're going to talk about accessing emergency available funds, getting access to those government programs, and having that discussion with your financial representatives are some of the things that you can do to ensure that this period you are making good decisions to help you manage your finances. Next slide, please. So let's talk about your financial situation. If your financial situation has been impacted because of COVID, okay, maybe you need to prepare and review your budget. Maybe you need to look at ways to cut spending. What about your debts? Don't just let the bills pile up and say you can't pay it, right? You need to reach out to your creditors, manage this debt proactively. There were programs that were put in place where people might be able to defer payments. What I will say is if you are making deferring repaying debts, you want to ensure that you understand that you're still going to be paying interest on that debt and how that impacts you afterwards, because likely you will have more debt. Okay, so these are some of the things that you need to do to look at. If you have emergency funds, because we always say it's good to save for a rainy day, you want to access that. We also talk about support programs. Well, the government has support programs. In the beginning, they had the Canada Emergency Relief Benefit. Now they've moved that to the Canada Recovery Benefits. They also put in benefits for seniors. They had topped up the OAS, Older Adult Supplement. They topped up the GIS, Guaranteed Income Supplement. There was also the Ontario Gains Program. So all these changes have been put in place. And if you weren't aware of them and you needed to access them and look up this information, there's lots of information there to help you figure out, what are your options? How can you figure out how to navigate your financial situation during this particular time? If you're looking for help on, how to set up a budget, how to figure out on ways to cut back your spending, go on our website. We have tools that can help you do that. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about that emergency fund. Somebody said to me, yeah, I have money set aside, but it's not an emergency fund. I have money that I had set aside for vacation. And I'm saying, if you need cash now and you have money that's set aside that you are not using, use that as your emergency fund. It's better that you use what you have readily available than have to scramble and look for other ways to get access to money. If you're thinking, well, you know what, I need to set up an emergency fund because this is not something I had thought about. A good rule of thumb to follow is that you want to ensure that your expenses are covered for 3 to 6 months. I will tell you that working in this industry, I always knew that, you know, we had to cover and have an emergency fund because it's a good thing. It's a good practice to have. So I always had a number in my head. Yes, I have enough money to cover for X number of months. Then we developed a calculator, an emergency fund calculator. And I thought, oh, you know what? I should use this calculator and check it and make sure that I'm on track. I put in some numbers in the calculator, and you know what? I realized I wasn't saving as much as I needed for my emergency fund. So there are tools out there that can help you, you know, figure out how to cut back on spending, figure out how much money you need to have saved for a rainy day in the event something unexpected happens. Okay. So then on our next slide, we talk about those government support programs, and you can certainly find information on where to access those cash benefits, the different programs that are out there on the ontario.ca website or canada.ca website. And don't forget, we also give this information on our website on getsmarteraboutmoney.ca. So there are lots of places that you can go find information on where to get support programs. Next slide, please. So I talked about the recovery benefit. There's the OAS. There's the Ontario Gains Guaranteed Annual Income System payment. Then there's also that reduction in withdrawals for RIFs. So if you have a RIF program, certainly you know that you can reduce withdrawals by 25%. And then, of course, there are all our local agencies, organizations out there that are providing different programs to seniors, and many of them have received additional funding from our government to ensure that they are able to continue to provide the services that our seniors need. Next slide, please. And again, where would you get that? On COVID-19 and Your Money Hub on that section of our website. So let's talk about your investments and what happens during a volatile market. And certainly at the period of COVID-19, you know, you saw the stock market take a drop, and it's been going up and down a little bit. So if you have investments, you know, this is a time where many people are anxious. And we know through our research that approximately 50% of Canadians were experiencing increased stress with respect to their investments. You're investing for your plan because you have a plan. You want to follow your plan, right? So if your plan hasn't changed, then maybe you don't need to make any changes. One of the things we say is, you know, as investors, not even as investors, but humans, we tend to make a lot of decisions based on emotions. And when it's a volatile market, you want to make sure that you're not making decisions rashly. You don't want your emotions to affect that decision-making process. Because what can happen is you see your investments dropping, and maybe you think, oh my goodness, I can't lose anything. You're going to sell everything. Or maybe you think, oh my goodness, everything's cheap because the stock market went down, so everything's lower in price. And you say, well, now's a good buying opportunity, and you run out to buy. But wait a minute, why are you investing? Do you need to sell? Do you need to buy? Look at your plan, follow your plan. You know, what's your time horizon? When do you need access to that cash? So has that changed? Okay, so you want to review your goals. When you review your goals, that will ensure that then, you know what, you're going to follow your plans. Because if your goals change, then maybe you need to make adjustments to your plan. And that's when it leads to having that discussion with your financial representative, because they know you. They've helped you put together this plan. And with this plan, they're going to help you meet your goals. So if your plan has changed, your financial representative, that advisor, can help you make those changes. At the same time, you know what? Always ensure that you've updated the Know Your Client form, because this form, you know, sets out some of the guidelines that your advisor would be following to put your plan in place. The other thing is, make sure you have a trusted contact person on this form. And this is something that some firms have been doing, and some have not, and it's something that we want all firms to do. And you can certainly ask, because you know what, if the person you're working with, this financial representative, suspect that there's an issue, perhaps they're thinking, oh my goodness, there's a case of financial abuse. There's a problem here. I need to reach out to someone that my clients trust on their behalf to have a discussion because I'm concerned. Then at least they have this trusted contact person information on your form that they can contact on your behalf. Maybe there's other things that you might need to share with this person also. You know what? Your financial situation has changed and you're thinking, maybe I need to move. Again, this will impact your financial plan. So it's really important that you have these types of discussions and then you're communicating with your financial representative. And you know, this person, they have the qualifications, right? To help you with your investments. They've made these investment recommendations. They understand how they work, and they can explain all these things to you and how those investments can help you meet your goals. Next slide, please. So care about your investments. You know what? Ask questions. I know if it's based on my personal experience, I'm not an expert in any one thing and I go on an expert, well, I'm going to take their word for it and follow what they say. But you know what? This is your money. So you have to ask questions. If they're making recommendations, you want to ask, why should we do this? How is it going to help me meet my goals, right? What about this? What if I need my money sooner? These are some of the questions to think if you're working with someone who's helping you manage your investments. You want to also know how risky things are, right? So you want to ensure that your plan is updated. Now, you've got investments and you likely get monthly statements and you get confirmation slips of things that are happening. Hopefully, when you get these slips and you get these statements, you're reviewing them. Because if there's a problem, when you review them, you can get in contact with that financial representative right away so that you can resolve that problem. If you don't look at them for 6 months, you might have forgotten what you discussed, you know, what you agreed to do. And then you're thinking, oh my goodness, where are my notes? I'm not sure that this is right. Did we really talk about that? So that might be a problem. And, you know, I'm talking about investments, but really this applies to all your financial stuff. If you get your credit card statements and your bank account statements and all that good stuff, you should also be reviewing those as soon as you get them, because you know what? The sooner you review them, the sooner you see a problem, the sooner you can act and resolve and get that problem solved right away. So it's really important to communicate regularly with your advisor. Now, Rianne talked about, you know, the challenges that some people may face during this particular time with COVID-19. And I think it's really important that, you know, we ensure that our wills and estate planning documents are all put in place, because what if something would have happened and you couldn't do something about your finances, or you needed someone to make a decision about your health? And who would do that on your behalf? Where would they be able to access your information? I know, and I've been doing these presentations. I've had seniors who were on my presentations and they're saying, you know what, we're being told we can't go to the bank. Now I have to go online. I'm not comfortable online. I don't know what to do. Could I get someone else to do it for me? So you know what? You want to ensure that you have this process in place where if you're not able to do something or unable to act, that someone else can step in and act on your behalf. So it's really important that you have all these documents put in place. Also, you know, if you have these documents put in place, are you communicating this information to anyone? And I think that's really important, because people say, yep, I've got my will, got my power of attorney, got everything, it's all put in place. Does someone you know that you trust know how to access this information? And I'm not only talking about your wills and powers of attorney and all that good stuff. What if someone needed to access your contact information? And this is all the contact information of the people on your cell phone. Is your password written down in a safe place? Can someone get access to that contact list? What if someone needed to reach out to a medical professional on your behalf? Would they know which medical professional you deal with? And this is where I talk about, you want to be able to communicate this information. So you want to ensure that this type of information is documented. And one of the best places to do that is go on our website. We have a form called Personal Information Inventory. And on this form, you can put down, all the professionals you deal with, your financial professionals, medical professionals, all those important documents that you have and where they're located, all the passwords for your social media account. Then you're going to take that form, put it in a safe spot, and just tell someone you trust, hey, I've got everything put in order. That information is on this form, and I've put this form in this place. So if someone needed to step in and get access to this information on your behalf, it is readily available. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can do to plan for the unexpected, help you manage your finances during difficult times. So now where else can you go get additional information? We talk about our website, getsmarteraboutmoney.ca. Great website. And not because I work at the OSC, I think it's a great website. I use the website personally also, not only professionally. So it's got a lot of information to help you. So if you go on the website, what would you find? You would find information on our next slide. You would see that we have information on COVID-19 and your money. And Mike earlier talked about some of those videos that we have, because you know what? These frauds are out there. So we put out these COVID-19 fraud alert videos. We know people are concerned about their investments and how they are protected, because you're seeing businesses are not doing well, so they're concerned about how their investments are protected. So we talk about that on the COVID-19 and your money website. How are my investments protected? What should you be doing about investing during this volatile period? Other resources that you can find. Lots of budgets, worksheets. I talked about that emergency fund calculator, the spending habits calculator. You know what? There's also something that we recently launched in this week, and that is our cash flow calculator. You want to assess, how your financial situation is. One of the things is you do a budget, but the other thing is, your cash flow. What do you have coming in and what's going out? That also is one way to help you figure out what your finances are like during this period or at any point in time, okay? So there's a plethora, a wealth of information on the website. I know some of you may also be familiar with different scams, and you're familiar with Bitcoins and people being asked to send money and send out Bitcoins. And I have many people asking me, what are Bitcoins and how do they work? So, those are things that are out there. You can certainly go on the website and also learn about those types of products and how they work and the risk associated with investing in them. So another resource that we have, and this is one that we've developed really to help New Canadians. We're a multicultural society. We recognize that not everyone, English is their first language. So we have a microsite called Investing Introduction, where some of the information that we've shared with you is available in 22 languages, including, Tagalog, Spanish, Chinese, Hindi, Punjabi, so that, if people need this information, there is a place where they can go get it in a language that they can understand. Another resource, another tools that we have, and I call it a tool really, it's Investor News. That's an online e-newsletter where we publicize, topics, new resources. We put out investor warnings. We also sometimes will highlight these different types of webinars that we're holding. So this is a place where you can, get information on a regular basis, and you can sign up for that e-newsletter on our website. And some of you now may be more active on social media. So you have a Twitter account. We have a Twitter feed at smarter_money. I believe we have a Twitter chat coming up this month on fraud. So that's something that you may be interested in. We also have a Facebook page at Get Smarter About Money. And certainly we have lots of videos on YouTube on Get Smarter About Money. And these YouTube videos are short and they cover different financial topics. So there's a whole wealth of places that you can go and get information. All else fails, you're not sure what to do. You have a question, you suspect fraud, you're looking for information, you want to check background of someone you're working with, you can always contact the OSC. I mean, Mike talked about the fact that we have a great team out there, and a great team of people at the contact center. They're there, their job is really to help answer your questions. They're highly knowledgeable, so you can call us, you can also email us. There are different ways that you can reach us. And that said, I know we've talked a lot. I'm going to turn it back to Rianne because she's got more information to share with you. Thanks, Rianne.
Thank you so much, Christine and Mike, for your informative educational information that you provided on all the securities. I know we've got a lot of positive comments coming from our participants around this valuable information, and we will put together, my colleague and I, a quick sheet with some of the resources and contact information, some quick, sort of those tips that we will share on our social media as well, because I think there are some good contacts and resources that were shared, and it's hard to keep track of all that as we go through the webinar. I just wanted to highlight a few tools that we also have on our website that we've developed currently, but also in the past. We've done a couple on COVID frauds and scams, just some tips sheets that you can see there. We also have a couple of fact sheets that we've done around frauds and scams in multiple languages. So you'll see one here called Safe and Sound. So it kind of goes through some of the fraud prevention tips. And then we have fact sheets on financial abuse, powers of attorney, and just some quick case studies and resources that you can access. I believe they're in English and French, Farsi, Punjabi, and Mandarin, I believe, are the, and I think there's one that's also in Russian. So if you check out our website under our resources and tools, you'll find that information there available for you. You can download them. Just to remind people, again, it is Financial Literacy Month. And again, just building on what Chris had talked about, resources, the Government of Canada also has other tools that you may supplement the work that OSC has done that you can find here as well. And they also are playing a big role in social media to try to get information out to the consumers in across Canada around protecting their money. So I just wanted to highlight that. If you are concerned about an older adult, or you're a senior yourselves and you're looking for information and you're not knowing where to get help in your region, please call the Senior Safety Line. They're a trained counselor on the end of the phone who can support you in your situation. We have seen an increase of calls since COVID. Again, they're not a crisis management, but they can provide some resources and information. And as I say, they're able to support you. It's short term. Again, they don't do case management on the phone, but they are an excellent resource for people to call, and available in over 150 languages as well. That they have translation services that they use. Some other lines, I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but just to highlight the Assaulted Women's Helpline for women. November is also Women Abuse Prevention Month. So we are partnering also with the Assaulted Women's Helpline to do some other education. And again, it's another resource that people can tap into. If you live in the GTA area, there's also a Toronto Seniors Helpline. They also have outreach services for individuals. Sometimes that varies in terms of outreach based on the COVID situation at the time. So I would encourage you just to call to find out what their capacity is in terms of doing that outreach in community to support individuals. If you're looking for legal support, the Advocacy Center for the Elderly is a good resource. They're part of Legal Aid, so they operate the same kind of way. But they are they're lawyers that can provide information, do a lot of work around elder abuse specific issues, but do cover many issues around financial mistreatment that we've talked about. So those are listed here. As Michael had indicated, you can call your local police, the Crime Stoppers, if you want to report information, the Alzheimer's Society, your local health LIN organization. If you know someone who needs some health care that might be affiliated, that they've been defrauded, maybe they don't have the financial resources but need some support, there are community agencies that they can reach out to. And then just wanted to highlight, there is mandatory reporting only in long-term care and retirement homes. So the phone numbers are listed there for people who feel that there may be financial abuse happening within those situations or within those locations. You can report that within the sector that the person resides in. I'm going to turn over to my colleague Laura, because I know that there has been a few questions posed by our participants that we'll ask our panelists to respond to. So Laura?
Great, thank you so much, Rayanne. This was a great webinar. We're getting a lot of uptake in the Q&A chat box. So we are committed to providing an in-depth resource list after this webinar, and will be posted on our website along with the recording of this. So we'll jump into the question and answer, because I think this is a very fundamental part of our webinar. So first question, actually, if we could have the rest, thanks Mike for showing your video. If we could have the rest of the panelists show their video.
It's not showing the Laura, so don't worry about it.
Okay, then I'm not going to worry about it. So if we could just have a panelist jump in, answer the question. Okay, we can see Chris, good stuff. Do we have to report any free COVID money to the CRA?
It is taxable income.
Okay, so that would be a clear yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's considered taxable income.
Okay. Is there an office like the OSC in BC?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for the question, Carla. I did send you a direct chat with my email address, so please reach out to me. I understand you have a particular issue you wanted to discuss. So yeah, there is the British Columbia Securities Commission, as in a similar manner to we have here in Ontario, and in fact in every province there is a securities commission.
Thank you, Mike. So next question is, can somebody use my phone number temporarily to show as caller ID? I've received a call from unknown person claiming that they've received a call from her number. However, she did not call. Is there any way to protect my phone number or prevent somebody using my number on the caller ID?
Yeah, with technology today, it's almost impossible to know who's calling you, because they call it spoofing. They can use electronic means to make it look like they're calling from a local number in your neighborhood. They can make it look like they're calling from a government agency or a particular organization, but they're not. So that's where, as I mentioned, we always recommend that if you have concerns, just take the person's name, say, give me your name, give me your phone number, the agency you're calling from, look up the agency yourself online, call the number that you know is the correct number, and ask if they have a person working there by the name of whatever the person's name is. And that way you can be comforted knowing that you're dealing with a legitimate person. So yeah, calls you see, you can't trust the caller ID. Same as emails, you can't always trust emails. I got one the other day, said it was from Netflix, that my account was in arrears. But when you look at the address line, it's not from Netflix. It's a similar, it looks similar to the legitimate Netflix email address, but it's not. So you have to be very careful.
And Mike, am I correct that this would typically be referred to as spoofing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I've worked with clients or seniors where they've received calls where it's coming up as Ontario Provincial Police.
Yeah.
So I advise to call that detachment back, not just take it for granted that it is officer calling.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah.
So into the next question, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but what is the difference between a financial advisor and a financial advisor? I understand one has qualifications and one doesn't. Which is which, and what, and does it matter?
So I can take that, Laura.
Okay.
So advisor is spelled under the Securities Act, ADVISER. So, right now there are people out there being spelled using the title advisor, and one is spelled with ER and one is spelled with OR. My thing to you is if you're working or looking for an advisor, don't worry about how they spell advisor. What you want to do is check that that person is registered. You want to check their registration. You want to find out their registration category, because then that tells you what qualifications they have and what services and products they are qualified to provide you. It's not so much the spelling of the name. It's really, what is that person qualified to do for you? Are they registered with the Securities Commission? But a very good question. Thank you for that.
And this is from the same individual. They're wanting to know if an investigation is open through the OSC. Why would somebody not just call police? Just wondering the benefits, if OSC can help get funds back, or if through investigation hold the fraudsters accountable in a different way than policing under the criminal code.
Yeah, good question. Thanks for that, Denise. It's sort of a multi-layered approach to fraud, as with many other sort of oversight bodies and government agencies. We work closely with the police, whether it's the RCMP, the OPP, local police services. We communicate regularly on cases. So, if we get a case that looks like it's a straight criminal case, we'll refer it to whatever the appropriate police agency. And conversely, they refer matters to us if it involves potential breaches of the Securities Act. So, to answer your question, who to report to, you can always call the OSC, and if it's a matter that is not within our mandate, we will forward it to the appropriate agency. And same with the police. I mean, they're good about contacting us if it's something that's within our mandate. As far as getting funds back, it doesn't generally happen at the OSC level. Our commission is more about putting sanctions in place to prevent further harm, as opposed to getting people's money back for them. Generally, the remedy for getting money back is to hire a lawyer and go through the civil process. As far as holding fraudsters accountable, we put orders in place. If those orders are breached, people can be put in jail. There's a provision on the Ontario Securities Act, a fraud provision. So fraudsters can receive up to 5 years less a day in jail, or I believe it's up to a $10 million fine pursuant to the Securities Act. And we have a joint serious offenses team at the OSC, and it's a partnership with OSC investigators, lawyers, our accountants, and we partner with the OPP and the RCMP. They work together in tandem to investigate matters that might be what are considered quasi-criminal under the Securities Act. And like I said, people can get up to 5 years less a day in jail, or they can deal with straight criminal matters of straight criminal fraud. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Next question, what legal obligations does the FI have in reporting major changes to investment holdings in a in-trust account?
That'd be up your alley, Chris, I think.
You know what? I really don't know what legal obligations the financial institution would have. So I can't answer that. I honestly don't know. So my suggestion would be to contact the OSC, our call center or contact center. Would be able to help you and point you in the right direction with that. The other thing is, if you prefer, we can certainly follow up for you and get back in touch with you with the answer to that, because I really don't know, and I would not even want to try and guess what that answer would be.
And now one last question. How do you check in regards to a financial advisor's registration?
You can contact us again. Our contact center can certainly check for you, or if you prefer to do it yourself, you can go online. We have a website called checkbeforeyouinvest.ca. And when you get to that site, there's a place where you can check registration and you put in the person's name, it goes into a database, a national database. So anyone that's registered with the Securities Commissions in Canada, so that's provincial and territorial, all the different commissions, we all put in names in this database. So they can put in that person's name, check it, and it'll pop up as to where they work, what their category is. The nice thing is also when you check registration, you also find out if there was ever any disciplinary history in this person's background, because we all contribute to this database. And if we took action, that information would also be in their file. So you get access to that information also. But check before you invest or call the OSC at 1-877-785-1555.
Great. Is that all, Laura, of the questions?
Actually, there's just one last question. I do want to get to it. How often does a FI have to report besides sending out T3 or T5s?
Again, that is something that I really don't know.
So I have a sense that these are very specific questions that the individual asking the question, I would, as Chris had mentioned, reach out to the Ontario Securities Commission, and I'm sure they'd be able to refer you this person to get more specific answers.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wonderful. And Rayanne, that is it for the Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your excellent questions. I just wanted to let people know that Laura and I will put together sort of a quick key points and resources information that both Mike and Christine shared with us, because I know they will be on the slide deck, but just to make them more little readily available for you. So we'll do that within the next few weeks, and we'll post that on our social media and put it on our website, so people will have that available so they can download them and have access. But again, you can go to the OSC website and access the many tools and resources that they have. So on behalf of Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, I want to thank you both, Chris, Mike, as well as our ASL interpreter, for joining us today. Thank you, and have a good afternoon. And the webinar and recording PowerPoint will be posted on our website within the next couple of days. So thank you all, and stay tuned. We do have other webinars coming up on different issues and topics. So if you're not on our mailing list, I encourage you to go to our website. You'll see a pop-up menu to join our mailing list. If you sign up there, and you will get all notices about upcoming events and webinars that we're hosting. So thank you so much, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.